Picture this. You sit down to work, but nothing comes out. You just can't. Or you get to the end of the day and you wonder, where the hell did the time go? Because it wasn't into your to-do list. Were you just distracted, maybe lazy? Probably not. You actually have two separate resources, and most productivity advice actually only ever talks about one of them. But the other one is why you can't seem to get anything done when things are hard, even when your calendar's clear, or sometimes even when things are not that hard. By the end of this video, you're gonna have 4 shifts that you can make right now to get the most out of any type of time, even the hard ones. I'm Janae, I run Productivity Stacks, and we are an evidence-based productivity channel for freelancers and small business owners, just like you. I spent 10 years coaching people to work with their brain, not against it. And today, I'm gonna show you exactly why those blank days or afternoons or mornings happen and what to build so that it stops costing you. Subscribe if that sounds useful. Before we get to the science, I built a tool that gives you the TLDR, all the action items, the practical side of everything that we're covering today, and will help you walk you through all of the action items too. So if you're kind of in a low moment right now, you can go ahead and grab that now. If you really want to understand the why behind it, stay with me because that why is kind of really what makes it stick. Okay, let's get to shift 1. You can't solve something that you haven't properly diagnosed. And most of us have been making the wrong diagnosis because we've been tracking the wrong thing. We're told to track time, hours in the day, slots in the calendar, how long a task should take. And time does matter, don't get me wrong, we should be tracking it, but it's not the only resource that matters. The second resource is bandwidth, and this is the one that productivity advice tends to leave out. Researchers spent years studying what they call mental bandwidth, and what they found is this. When you're under pressure, could be financial stress, a health scare, a family crisis, sometimes even time pressure, our cognitive bandwidth shrinks. Not because we're weak, because our brains are running background processes that consume processing power, leaving kind of less mind available for everything else. Think about it like this. You have 2 laptops. Both have 3 hours of battery left, but one has 47 browser tabs open, 3 software updates running, and is syncing to the cloud. That laptop is going to crawl. Humans kind of work just like that. And here's the critical piece. Time and bandwidth don't move together. That means that at any given moment, you could be in 4 different situations, not 2. The first is high time, high bandwidth. This is your superpower window. Your calendar is clear, your brain is firing. This is when your most valuable, creative, strategic work happens. These windows are precious. You can hold a lot in your brain simultaneously. You have to protect these times. Then you have low time, high bandwidth. This is sprint mode. Your brain is fully online, but you don't really have much runway. So you can still do deep, high value work, but just in focused bursts. So don't waste this high bandwidth on low value tasks. A lot of people spend this time on quick hits, just getting things out of the way because of the time constraint. But if you have that bandwidth, it's better to really use it like that. We'll talk about that just a second in the action step. Then high time, low bandwidth. This is sustained mode, and this is the dangerous one because it looks like opportunity. Your calendar's wide open and you feel like you should be crushing it, but your bandwidth is depleted. This is the quadrant that most people misdiagnose as laziness or lack of discipline. And low time, low bandwidth. This is survival mode. Triage only. Keep the lights on. Nothing creative, don't do complex tasks, nothing that requires you to hold more than you already are. The first shift is simply this. Before you sit down to work, make the correct diagnosis. Which quadrant am I actually in right now? Not which one do I wish I was in, which one am I actually in? Let me show you what a diagnosis looks like in real life because I have a pretty good example. A few years ago, I got a call from my doctor. Go to the ER immediately. I was like, what? She said some tests had come back inconclusive and the bad possibility was really bad. So I packed my laptop because I knew I'd want something to do. And if we've ever been to the ER before, you know, it often takes a really long time. And I checked to make sure that I had my list of small pre-decided tasks if I needed them. I call them my quick hits just in case. Okay, I get to the ER and I got taken straight back, which again, if you've been to the ER, this is not a great sign. And there I sat, laptop open, newsletter pulled up, ready to write. On paper, I had time, maybe 2 hours, maybe 3 hours, who knows? All free time, nobody bothering me, no meetings, classic high time, right? Maybe not. My brain was running through constant threat simulations. Is this the bad thing or not? What happens to my business if it is? What do I tell my family? Those loops were consuming the exact same cognitive bandwidth that I would need to write my newsletter. I wasn't in superpower mode, high time, high bandwidth. I was deep in sustain mode, high time, but almost no bandwidth. And the correct bandwidth diagnosis saved me from just staring at a blank screen, wondering what was wrong with me? Why can't I force myself to write this newsletter for who knows how long, and then afterwards sit there all frustrated that I had wasted my time. I knew that wasn't what was happening because of this shift 1. So let's take action. The shift 1 action is simple. Before you sit down to work, do the next thing, just run a 30-second diagnosis. 2 questions. How much time on the calendar, hours, minutes, whatever, do I actually have? And then how much is realistic given what else is happening? What's running in the background? Like, did you sleep well? Did you not sleep well? Are you worried about anything? Did you eat well? Whatever the case may be. These are not wellness questions, these are bandwidth questions, and each one can be a browser tab that you have open. These 2 answers give you your quadrant. Here's what to do with it. Superpower. High time, high bandwidth. Protect this window. This is for your most important, most cognitively demanding work. Again, do not fill this with admin. Take a second to notice what conditions created this state. When you are in it, this is the best time to figure this out. What did you eat before? How did you sleep? I wear a wearable and I use the data on here to help me track this as well, because it turns out you actually can do things to recreate it, but only if you know what caused it in the first place. Maybe yours often happens in the morning. Maybe it's late at night or in the afternoon. Again, think about what is causing it. Next is sprint mode. Not very much time, low time, but high bandwidth. Your brain is firing. Don't waste it. Pick your single most important task and work in focused bursts. Batch your decisions and creative work into the time that you do have. Don't try to wait for some magical superpower moment when you're not sure when it's going to come. You have this sprint mode available to you right now. Sustain. High time, low bandwidth. Okay, we're headed to the different section here now. You've just done the most important thing already in shift 1. You have made the diagnosis and you have said to yourself, self, I am in sustain mode. I have to accept that. Cool, crushed it. Your job right now is accurate awareness, and your next action item is gonna be in shift 2. And if you are in survival mode, same thing. Low time, low bandwidth, naming where you are, check, shift 1, done. You're not lazy, you're not broken, you are resource constrained. Shift 2 has your next move, so let's get into that. Okay, shift 2, you've got your diagnosis. What are you gonna do with it now? This is where cognitive load theory comes in, and it's one of the most useful frameworks I've found for understanding why some days feel impossible, even when the tasks look pretty simple. Researchers found that your working memory has a very limited capacity. When total cognitive load exceeds that capacity, performance drops sharply. What does that mean? When you're in sustain or survival mode, those slots are full before you open a document, before you try to start another task. So the easy task isn't landing in an empty inbox, it's trying to squeeze into a full one. That's why you reread the same sentence 4 times, it's why you type something, immediately forget what you were about to say, and that's not a focus problem. That's cognitive load theory doing exactly what the science predicts. But here's the part that should actually make you feel a little bit better. The research also shows that stress doesn't uniformly kill all productivity. Simple, structured, pre-decided tasks can be maintained even under that high cognitive load. It's the complex, creative, strategic work that takes the hit. That means every quadrant has a task strategy, and the goal isn't to push through, it's to match. So, back in the ER, once I made that correct bandwidth diagnosis and I accepted that I was in sustain mode and not superpower, the right move became obvious. I put the laptop away, I went to my pre-decided simple tasks. Things that I didn't really have to think a lot about and just execute. And that worked for a little while. I was in sustain mode and I was doing sustained tasks, it matched. And then eventually even that stopped working. My bandwidth had dropped even further. Now I was in survival. I just couldn't stop thinking about how bad that worst case scenario would be and what it would mean for me and everybody around me. So I closed everything and I watched TV shows that I had on my phone. And you know what? That was the right call. Not lazy, not giving up, the correct task for the correct quadrant. I was keeping an eye on my bandwidth the entire time and adjusting quickly as I went so that I didn't lose time. So let's get to your action items. For shift 2, build what I call a bandwidth matched task list. You can build them separately, but I like to just tag them right on my actual ClickUp list, and I can filter which items I need on that quick hits list whenever I need it. When you add something to your list, just tag it appropriately. Ideally, do this when you're in superpower or sprint mode, not when you need to actually execute that quick hits list. If you are in sustain or survival mode right now, keep watching, your action item is coming. For those who can, your list or tags will be a high bandwidth list or tag, the work that requires your full brain, strategy, writing, complex decisions, creative work. This only gets touched in superpower or sprint mode. A low bandwidth list or tag, pre-decided structured mechanical tasks, admin, maybe inbox triage. things that have simple execution. This is your sustain list. You don't decide what goes on it when you're depleted, if you can, because deciding costs bandwidth that you don't have, so you build it now. Again, this is for my superpower people. I'm gonna get to the other modes in a second. One more thing, don't forget to add rest to your survival plan. What does a survival day look like in your business? What are the 3 non-negotiables that keep client relationships intact when everything else can wait? Know this before you need it, because when you're in survival mode is not the best time to figure it out. An important note here, I just want to make really clear that this doesn't accidentally somehow become permission to abandon your really important projects every single time your bandwidth dips. That's not what this is. Sustain mode doesn't mean that you can't move meaningful work forward. It just means that you probably shouldn't finalize your website today if you can avoid it. What you can do is something like find 4 WordPress themes that you really like. That one small thing moves the project forward and fits in the cognitive space that you actually have. I call this your MVP, or minimum viable progress. It's the smallest version of a task that still moves something that matters forward, not admin instead of real work. Real work sized down to fit your current bandwidth. Here are a few examples of what that looks like in practice. Instead of work on the website for 2 hours, you would find 4 WordPress themes that you like. Instead of write the sales page, write 1 headline options. That's it, done. The rule for an MVP task is 1 concrete, completable thing that requires no decisions and no holding of context, small enough to fit in whatever cognitive space that you have left, still connected to something that matters. So here's what that looks like by quadrant. Superpower. This is your moment to build the infrastructure. You're really fortunate if you're in this mode watching this video, because now you can take this to the max. Create that bandwidth match task list, tag items in your task manager so that future you can filter it instantly. Define your survival minimum now, 3 non-negotiables that keep your business running on the worst days, so you never have to figure that out when you're depleted. Sprint mode. You have the capacity, but not the runway. So be ruthless about what gets it. Find 1 high-value task at a time, tag your existing to-do list as you go. Even 15 minutes is enough for a meaningful MVP on something that matters. Sustain mode. Filter to your low bandwidth list right now if you have one. If you don't have one, find your MVP, the smallest thing that still moves something real forward. If nothing is moving, rest counts. It's not giving up, it's the right call for this quadrant. It could even just bump you up another quadrant. Survival. 1 question. What are the 3 things that keep clients intact, that keep the lights on, that keep things happening? Do that. Everything else waits. That's the whole job right now. I'll talk more about chronic versus acute problems if you are in survival mode for too long, but for this video, just keep it simple. Okay, that brings us to shift 3. Shifts 1 and 2 work beautifully when you have enough bandwidth to implement them, but what about the seasons when you don't? What about the weeks, the months where low bandwidth isn't a Tuesday afternoon, it's your entire reality? Here's the hard truth. You can't build bandwidth-aware systems from the bottom half of the grid. Sustain and survival mode are not design environments, they're survival environments. The thinking, the planning, the restructuring, all of that requires kind of the same cognitive resources that you don't really have when you're feeling so depleted. The research on self-regulation tells us that managing emotions, suppressing panic, staying composed, all of that is cognitively expensive. It draws on the same limited resources as your actual work. The difference is that it doesn't show up as output. So you look at a hard week, and you don't really see anything, and you don't account for all the invisible cognitive labor happening in the background. This is why the system has to be built in superpower or sprint mode, not because you're planning for failure, but because you're building something resilient enough to survive a human life. And human lives include seasons. Let me tell you the second chapter of my ER story, because this is really relevant now. So, fortunately, it turned out not to be the worst case scenario. I was very fortunate, but I did end up spending nearly a full year recovering with 2 torn tendons, 1 in each elbow. I lost the ability to type for months. I was in pain 24/7, and I ran my business on voice to text and very reduced hours, operating in a body that was constantly sending me pure distress signals. For almost a year, I lived in sustain and survival mode. And here's what saved me. I already had a system in place, and I had reduced my work hours previously. And if you're familiar with my story, you know that I went through a really hard season, which the specifics on that are a story for another time, but it caused me to have to reduce my workload to just 4 hours a day. And once I came out of that season and I still had that 4-hour a day workload, I was put in superpower mode, right? Because I had so much space. Once I was in superpower mode, I was able to design this system. So don't forget that we can also fill our cup and bump ourselves up these quadrants. We're not stuck where we are. But ideally, Systems are built when you have the space to build them, and then once you're in survival or sustain mode or something like that, that's really the time that those systems are stressed, right? So ideally, you wanna work yourself up those quadrants so that you can design a very well-working system, but don't worry if you are in those low bandwidth periods. There's still solutions that you can still take these action items to implement and then bump yourself up the quadrants. The action for shift 3 is a system audit. 3 questions, and ideally you do this in superpower sprint, but again, you can do it in all of the modes. I'll get to that in a second. First, what are my highest bandwidth tasks and when am I actually protecting time for them? Not hoping for time, scheduling it. Maybe you're a morning person, so yours is first thing. Maybe you get a burst in the evening. Track this and schedule accordingly. Superpower windows really need to be protected. They need to be in the calendar before everything else fills it. Second, what reoccurring task could become a checklist or a template right now? Every time you redo a process without a system, you're spending cognitive load that could have been eliminated. That's bandwidth that you're burning unnecessarily. Third, what is currently living only in my head? Anything that exists only in your memory is consuming working memory, whether you're actively thinking about it or not. Get it out of your head and into a system. And one final question to kind of sit with, if my bandwidth dropped by 50% tomorrow and stayed there for 6 months, what would break first in my business and in my life? Because that's one thing to fix today, to have a system for. Here's what that looks like quadrant by quadrant. Superpower. We already discussed this is your design window. So do the full audit in as much detail as you can. All 3 questions. Schedule those superpower windows before anything else claims the calendar. Pick one recurring task and turn it into a checklist today. And sit with the final question. If bandwidth dropped 50% for 6 months, what breaks first? That's your priority. Sprint mode. You don't have time for the full audit, but you can do one thing. Pick the single most important thing living in your head and get it out of there. Into a doc, a note, a system. One thing. That's your shift 3. Sustain. Maybe building everything out and auditing every single aspect of this isn't available to you right now. That's okay. Your job is to notice. When something feels like it should be systematized, capture that observation. Even just noting down, I should have an invoicing system for this client or in general is a good step toward this process. A voice memo, a quick note, anything. You could put all of these things together so that you have that ready to go when you do have the space. Don't lose the insight just because you can't act on it yet. That note becomes your superpower project later. Survival. You're living the season this shift is designed to protect against. Your only job is to get through it. If there's a sliver of capacity, write down one thing. What do I wish I'd built before this? That's your future shift 3. Right now, just survive. And don't worry, we are gonna give you some action items in shift 4 to really think about this and move things forward. And don't forget that MVP mode. Okay, in shift 4, I have to talk about a phrase that I really can't stand. Everybody has the same 24 hours in a day. You've probably seen this everywhere if you've followed hustle culture at all. The implication being that if you're not maximally productive with every hour of your day, then that's some character flaw, some discipline problem, motivation problem, something like that. And now that you understand this 2x2, I want you to see exactly how wrong this is and how it can really be harming your productivity. So if 2 people have the same 24 hours, but one of them is navigating a financial crisis, health scare, caregiving for a family member, or just came out of 3 consecutive nights of poor sleep or a full week of sprint mode with a client, they don't have the same usable hours. They just have the same clock. They don't have the same bandwidth. Researchers actually quantified this when they made financial stress cognitively present, just by asking people to think about a financial problem before a cognitive test. Performance dropped in ways comparable to losing IQ points. Those people didn't get less intelligent. It just shows that the bandwidth was consumed by worry before they even started. So this hustle culture framing ignores that bandwidth, not the clock, is the actual binding constraint on complex high quality output. So telling somebody in sustain or survival mode that they have the same 24 hours is like telling someone whose laptop has 47 tabs open that they have the same processor, so it's fine. Technically, they do have the same processor, the same 24 hours, but that's useless information. Here's where it gets really interesting. The response that most of us have to a low output day isn't neutral, it's guilt. And I need you to understand what guilt actually does to that 2x2 quadrant. Remember I told you earlier that there are things that you can do to actually bump yourself up those quadrants. Here's where we talk a little bit about that. Guilt is not a neutral experience. It runs as a background process. It's a browser tab. So on top of the 47 that you just opened, you're like, let me open 10 more guilt tabs. It eats the same cognitive bandwidth that you're already short on. So when you pile guilt on top of a depleted state, you're not motivating yourself to do better tomorrow, you're actually reducing your capacity to perform tomorrow. So you're taking a poor state and making it worse instead of climbing up the quadrant list. The science on reduced output during high stress, low bandwidth periods is not a moral failure, it's a predictable brain response to a measurable resource constraint. Accepting that, truly accepting it, is what frees up the bandwidth that you are burning on guilt and redirects it toward what's actually possible right now. Being kind to yourself in low bandwidth moments is not soft, it's the scientifically sound performance strategy. And it actually gives you quick wins that can help bump you up those quadrants. Let me finish my ER story. So I put the laptop away, I watched TV. I stopped fighting the diagnosis. I had fallen into survival mode. I just quit fighting it. And then I got the news. It wasn't the worst case. I was going to be okay. And something shifted. Not the room, not the time, not me, same person, same bed. The background processes stopped running in an instant. The threat simulations went quiet. The bandwidth came back. I opened the newsletter, I wrote the whole thing immediately. At the same time, I actually had less time and completely different bandwidth and zero guilt about the hours that came before where I spent on some quick hits and then watching TV because I had made the correct diagnosis. I knew that I'd made the correct diagnosis. I had matched the correct task, the correct quadrant, and then let the bandwidth restore instead of burning what little remained on shame. And that is what this framework is actually for. So this action item is probably the hardest one in the video because it's not an easy tag something in your to-do list system, it's a reframe. And reframes do take practice, but I hope you'll stick with me through the end of this. When you have a low output day, the default move is to interrogate yourself. Why couldn't I do more? What's wrong with me? Replace that with a diagnosis. What quadrant was I in today? Was my output actually appropriate for that quadrant? What do I need tonight so that tomorrow I start with more bandwidth than I have right now? It doesn't have to be double, it doesn't have to be superpower. What can I do to set myself up for success just a little bit right now? That's not letting yourself off the hook, that's using accurate information to make a better decision. And it will produce better output tomorrow than the guilt spiral will, every single time. One practical tool that helps is keeping a bandwidth log. Just a quick note at the end of the day. Which quadrant was I working in, what I worked on, how I felt. Over time, you'll start to see your own patterns, your natural superpower windows, your bandwidth drains, your recovery triggers. That data becomes the foundation for building a business that actually works with your brain. Here's what this looks like quadrant by quadrant. Superpower. You crushing it. You have the capacity right now to really build the habit. Start that bandwidth log today. Identify your known drains. What things reliably move you down the grid? Then build the other side. What restore your bandwidth? Schedule those intentionally, not just when you happen to have time. Sprint. Just 2 minutes at the end of today. Quadrant, tasks, how it felt. That's the log. That's the whole action. And when the guilt shows up, practice naming it out loud. That's a background process, and then let it run without feeding it. Get rid of it. Sustain. You are not behind. That framing is the guilt talking. Your output today was appropriate for your quadrant. Tonight, just ask yourself, what's one small thing that could give tomorrow's version of you slightly more bandwidth to start? Is it sleep? Could I just focus on getting to bed earlier? What about food? Maybe a conversation you could have, calling a friend, just one thing. Survival. This is the shift that was made for exactly where you are. You do not owe a guilt spiral on top of a hard season. One question again, that's it, same as sustain. What's one thing that I can do tonight to protect tomorrow's bandwidth, to not make the situation worse, to at least be sure that I stay where I'm at or go up, and not sit here blaming myself and moving myself further and further down, okay? You already got this. So time and bandwidth, not the same resource. They don't move together, and until you're diagnosing both, until you know what quadrant you're actually in, you're just making task decisions based on half the picture. So here's the question to sit with. Not why couldn't I be more productive during that hard stretch, but what would my business need to look like so that a low bandwidth period doesn't crater everything? Because that's a buildable thing. So what we've done so far today is protected our superpower windows in the calendar, created a pre-made low bandwidth task list, set some MVPs for your most important projects on hard days, and a survival plan that exists before you need it. You're not trying to be productive at all costs. You're trying to build something that works with your brain across the full range of what a human life actually looks like. Good days and hard ones. That's the goal. And now you have the science to back up why it matters. I'm Janae, this is Productivity Stacks, and we're here with evidence-based content for the real way that humans actually work. I've got a free bandwidth check-in tool below. It walks you through the diagnosis and task matching process in just a few minutes, and it includes all 4 quadrant action cards from today, and the link to that is in the description. And before you go, drop me a comment. What quadrant do you spend the most time misdiagnosing? I read every single one. See you then.